Earl Campbell was a once-in-a-lifetime NFL running back, and no skill position in history dealt out more punishment to defenders than him. But those blows came with a price, and now he's just a shell of his former self. In the early 80s, Earl Campbell dominated the NFL with his hard running style and toughness that made him truly one of a kind. While most running backs try to avoid contact by running out of bounds or turning their body at the last minute to minimize the hit, Campbell would square up his shoulders and mow down defenders like a runaway freight train. But over time, his aggressive style began to catch up with him. Although he was able to play through the pain almost every week, he was racking up damage that would take its toll after he retired. When you treat your body with reckless abandon, the bill eventually comes due. And few people have paid a higher price than Earl Campbell. On paper, based on his size and speed, or more accurately, his lack of speed, it's something of a miracle Earl Campbell ever played it down in the NFL. And for him to utterly dominate the game the way he did, it had to be the biggest miracle of them all. Although he excelled on both sides of the ball in high school, crushing the opposition on defense as a linebacker and mowing down anyone who dared to try and tackle him as a running back, at just 5'11", he was thought too short to play linebacker in the pros, and tipping the scale as at 245 pounds and running the 40-yard dash at the relatively slow pace of just 4.5 seconds, there wasn't much of a path as a pro running back either.
Personally, I feel as though that's what I do to myself. And I feel like, that it's a great thing to be able to go out and achieve such rewards as I had, my rookie year.
But first, Earl got the chance to showcase his talents on the college gridiron, and that's exactly what he did at the University of Texas. The Longhorns made him a running back exclusively, and the college football world quickly learned a very important lesson. Namely, no matter what the stopwatch said, Earl was football fast. No one had seen a runner with his combination of speed and power since the late Jim Brown started Syracuse. The Houston Oilers took him with the first pick of the 1978 draft, and they were rewarded with 8 seasons of some of the most dominating performances ever seen in the league. He had incredible balance, and no matter how hard they hit, it almost always took 2 or more tacklers to bring him to the ground. And when it came to hits, Earl gave as good as he got, or, as it was in most cases, he gave better than he got. Washington Redskins linebacker Jack Wysocki once said of Earl, "Every time you hit him, you lower your own IQ." And while people loved to watch Campbell steamroll his opponents, his aggressive style of play was not without its detractors. They reasoned with his style of running and seeking out contact, there was no way he could keep from getting injured or have a long career. Former Giants running back Ron Johnson, who himself twice gained 1,000 yards but had his career cut short by injuries, said of Campbell, "He runs with a lot of reckless abandon. You can run like that in college, but you can't do that for 10 years and hope to survive." And the Steelers' great Franco Harris, who also possessed a lethal combination of speed and power in his playing days, observed, "Knocking over people can look very good, but you can't do it forever. Sometimes it's going to be somebody else who knocks you over. So the most important thing, I think, isn't to get a few extra yards every time, but to make sure you're healthy enough to play." But Earl's style had taken him this far, and he wasn't about to change. His coach, O.A. Bum Phillips, agreed. "I've been looking for a back like Earl," he said. "I'm not going to change his style. Why would I? You don't want a guy who gets hit and then flops on the ground. Earl does the same thing other backs do, only better." According to Campbell, the hardest hit he ever took was from the Oakland Raiders safety Jack Tatum. Tatum, who was known as the Assassin, was no stranger to hard hits, and in 1978, he hit New England receiver Darryl Stingley so viciously that he spent the rest of his life as a quadriplegic. And one final note about that hit, you may have seen it on YouTube or seen it on old video. That game, that was a preseason game. And when Tatum met Campbell at the 2-yard line in a Raiders-Oilers game trying to keep Earl out of the end zone, he hit Campbell with such force that Earl lost consciousness. Amazingly, and despite the fact he was out on his feet, he fell backwards into the end zone after Tatum's hit had spun him around 180 degrees. Probably the first and only time a touchdown was scored by an unconscious player. And Campbell later said of that hit, "That lick I took from Tatum, that's the only time I ever felt somebody hit me. A shock went down to the heels on my feet, and it burned. Nobody knew this, but I was thinking, something's wrong."
I can remember it like yesterday. My right foot was about to hit the last.
But, as Johnson and Harris had predicted, playing that style of football that Campbell did always comes at a price. And unfortunately, Earl has been paying that price for a very long time. It started while he was still playing, as he missed 9 games over his 8 seasons due to various injuries.
I knew when I left UT I only wanted to play football 7 years. And a guy talked me into doing it a couple of years more. But I knew when I left UT I was going to do my thing in 7 years and I was going to be gone. I was going to disappear like a witch.
Of course, as often happens, most of the bill comes due after the players leave the game, and Earl was no exception. Since retiring, he's had both knees replaced along with 4 back surgeries, as doctors have tried in vain to fix his spinal stenosis. And that's just the surgeries. He also developed arthritis, and by the time he was 46, he could barely close his hand to make a fist. Add to the list a condition called drop foot, which is a malady caused by irritation or damage to the deep fibular nerve, including the sciatic nerve, or paralysis of the muscles in the anterior portion of the leg. Because of the extensive damage to his body, all the surgeries and treatments didn't provide a lot of relief, and what relief he did receive was often only temporary. As his pain increased, something else increased too, namely the amount of OxyContin tablets he was consuming on a daily basis. What had started out as a pill or two a day quickly ballooned into 10 or more. You add that to the case or so of Budweiser he was downing daily, and it became clear that Earl had a major problem. Finally, after watching their father's downward spiral, his 2 adult sons, Christian and Tyler, put their foot down. They confronted Earl on a Friday night and told him, "Have fun this weekend, because on Monday, it all stops. We've booked you into a treatment center and you are going to get clean." And, as so often the case, until he started getting treatment for his opioid addiction and alcoholism, he really didn't realize how much of a problem he had. After all, the pills had been prescribed by a doctor and you could buy beer legally all over the country. "I'm Earl Campbell," he thought. "How could this be happening to me?" The inpatient program that Earl attended normally takes 28 days to complete, but Campbell stayed for 44. Luckily for everyone involved, his stay was successful, and he's been clean and sober since 2009. Not only that, he spends a substantial amount of his time speaking to groups of people with addiction issues and at-risk youth, sharing his story of addiction and redemption. And although he did a great job at beating his addictions, Campbell still has to deal with the football-related injuries and the pain they cause on a daily basis. He's been using a wheelchair off and on since he was in his mid-40s, but as he's gotten older and his mobility has continued to decline, he is confined to the wheelchair for longer and longer stretches. Earl Campbell was a once-in-a-lifetime talent who punished offenders in a way no back had ever done, and no back has done since. The Steelers Hall of Fame defensive lineman Mean Joe Green summed it up best when he said, "He can inflict more damage on a team than any back I know of." For a brief period, Campbell dominated the league in a way few others ever have. But that domination came at a very high price, and that is a price that Earl continues to pay to this day. Was it worth it? Well, only Earl Campbell knows the answer. How about you? Would you trade 8 years of glory for continuous health problems and mobility issues after you're retired? We'd love to get your thoughts, so make sure you let us know in the comment section if that'd be a trade you'd be willing to make. Now that we've looked at Earl's post-career issues, let's look back at his playing days and see what made this man one of the best to ever do it. Earl Christian Campbell was born on March 29, 1955 in Tyler, Texas, to Ann and Bert B.C. Campbell. Tyler, which is located in the northeast corner of the state, is known as the rose capital of the world, a nickname it earned from a long history of rose production, cultivation, and processing. It is home to the largest rose garden in the United States, a 14-acre public garden complex that has over 38,000 rose bushes of at least 500 different varieties. In what may be one of the most ironic nicknames in history, Earl became known as the Tyler Rose later in his career. Earl was the middle child of the family, although not in the traditional sense. He had 5 older siblings and 5 younger siblings. Tragedy struck when Earl was just 11 when his father passed away from a heart attack. With Earl's mom trying to feed 11 kids on a house cleaner's wages, the children who were old enough, including Earl, all went to work in the area's rose fields to help out. Because of this, Earl did not play organized sports until junior high, or middle school as it's known now. Earl started his playing career in an unusual way. He began as a kicker, but after watching a Bears game on TV and seeing the havoc being unleashed by their Hall of Fame linebacker Dick Butkus, Earl knew his destiny did not lie in kicking. He was going to model his playing style after Butkus and become a linebacker. And from then on until his senior year in high school, that's exactly what he did. That's when his coach, Corky Nelson, who was one of the most successful high school coaches around, decided to move Earl from linebacker to running back. To say that was a successful switch would be a gross understatement. He rushed for 2,036 yards and racked up 28 touchdowns as he led John Tyler High School to the state 4A title. By the way, 4A was the biggest classification back then. In a state known for its passion for high school football and stadiums that routinely sell out even though they have over 10,000 seats, Earl was the best of the best. As Coach Darrell Royal of Texas, who was there to scout Campbell, later said, it was a man against boys. He was named Mr. USA Football and was named to the Parade High School All-American team. With accolades like that, Texas wasn't the only college interested in Earl. Campbell pretty much had his pick of colleges and could have had a full scholarship to any of them. But he wanted to stay close to his family, and he quickly narrowed his choices down to Houston, Oklahoma, Texas, Arkansas, and Baylor. After in-home visits from Barry Switzer of Oklahoma and Darrell Royal once again from Texas, Campbell ultimately chose Texas. Switzer, the Oklahoma head coach, said in his 1989 book that Campbell was the only player he ever saw who could have gone straight from high school to the NFL and immediately become a star. With Earl's size, Royal installed him at fullback, blocking the first 2 years for Graylin Wyatt and Lamb Jones in his junior season. Earl still got enough carries that he was able to rush for 2,600 yards combined in those 3 seasons, but that wasn't enough to save Royal's job. After going 5-5-1 in 1976, Royal, who had been the coach at Texas for 18 seasons, was dumped, and Fred Akers was brought in. One of the first moves Akers made was to install Campbell as the halfback in the I formation. As the featured back in the high-powered Texas offense, Campbell came into his own as a runner. He piled up 1,744 yards rushing, then a school record, and sped or plowed his way into the end zone for 19 touchdowns. That year was filled with highlights for Earl, including scoring 4 touchdowns in a 72-15 blowout of the Rice Owls. In his final regular season game, Campbell rushed for a career-high 222 yards in a 57-28 victory over rival Texas A&M. And the Longhorns, well, they finished the regular season undefeated and a number 1 ranking. There's Joe Montana. Campbell did his part, carrying 29 times for 116 yards in the game, but it wasn't enough, and Notre Dame was victorious 38-10, claiming the national championship. Texas finished the season ranked 4th in the final AP poll. Since Notre Dame scored 38 points, maybe they should have put Earl back in at linebacker. After his stellar senior year in which he led the nation in rushing, the postseason awards came streaming in. He was awarded the Heisman Trophy as the most outstanding college player after the season, becoming the first University of Texas winner of the award. He also became the first recipient of the Davy O'Brien Memorial Trophy, which is awarded to the outstanding player in the Southwest Conference. The Sporting News and United Press International each named Campbell the College Football Player of the Year. He was also a unanimous All-American, being named to the first team by every major selector. After winning just 2 games total in their first 2 seasons, the Tampa Bay Buccaneers once again had the first pick in the draft. Earl, for the first time in his life, resigned himself to playing for a losing team. But the Houston Oilers had other plans. Unlike the Buccaneers, the Oilers were a winning football team that, although they missed the playoffs, finished just 1 game behind the Steelers in the AFC Central Division race. General manager and head coach Bum Phillips believed that the Oilers were just 1 player away from becoming not only a playoff team, but a legitimate Super Bowl contender. And Bum firmly believed that that player was Earl Campbell. But to pry that number 1 pick away from Tampa Bay, Phillips knew they were going to have to offer up a pretty sweet deal. And that's exactly what they did, trading tight end Jimmy Giles for their 1st and 2nd round picks in the 78 draft and their 3rd and 5th round picks in the 79 draft. Phillips explained, this is a commitment to excellence. It takes a great running back to have a winning football team, and this kid is a great running back. So the Oilers got their man, and the Bucs, in addition to Giles, turned those draft picks into quarterback Doug Williams, guard Brett Moritz, defensive end Reginald Lewis, and quarterback Chuck Fusina. So who won the trade? Well, of course, the answer is Houston, right? That's a no-brainer. Of course, that's probably right, but it's not quite as cut and dried as you might think. Yes, Campbell turned out to be a Hall of Fame running back, and Moritz, Lewis, and Fusina never started a game in the NFL. But after a 4-6 rookie season, Williams and the Buccaneers won their division, beat the Eagles in the first round of the playoffs, and came very close to going to the Super Bowl, losing by the score of 9-0 to the Rams in the championship game. Of course, Doug Williams would later be traded to the then Redskins and take over the quarterbacking duties after Jay Schrader and Ed Rubbert were injured. He would then go on to guide them through the playoffs and through 4 touchdown passes in Super Bowl 22 when Washington throttled Denver 42-10 and Williams was named the MVP. Meanwhile, Campbell led the Oilers to the conference championship game in his first 2 seasons, only to get blown out by the Steelers in both. But the Oilers wouldn't return to the postseason until 3 years after Campbell left. So while the Oilers clearly got the better player, he was never able to take them to the promised land like Bum had envisioned. Of course, football is a team sport, and Campbell did his part from the moment he first stepped on the field. In his rookie season, he rushed for 1,450 yards, led the league in rushing, finished second in MVP voting to Terry Bradshaw by just 3 votes, and was the unanimous pick for Offensive Rookie of the Year. The next year, 1979, Campbell once again led the league in rushing with 1,697 yards, and he won his first and only MVP award. 1980 was the high point of Earl's career, rushing for 1,934 yards and winning Offensive Player of the Year, but once again, he finished second in the MVP voting to another Central Division foe. This time it was quarterback Brian Sipe of the Cleveland Browns. Campbell once again topped the 1,000-yard mark in 1981, reaching 1,376 yards, but his hyper-aggressive style was already starting to catch up with him, and he averaged just 3.8 yards per carry, a full yard worse than his average over the first 3 seasons. 1982 was marred by a 57-day strike that shortened the season to just 9 games. Campbell once again saw his production drop, averaging just 3.4 yards per carry. 1983, well, that was a last hurrah of sorts for the Tyler Rose. He rushed for 1,301 yards and bumped his average up to 4 yards per carry. It would also see Earl selected to the Pro Bowl for the 5th and final time. Nagging injuries began to take their toll, and in 1984, with the Oilers already 0-6, they got a call from Bum Phillips, the coach and GM of the Saints, a job he accepted after he was fired from the Oilers right after their second conference championship game loss. Amazingly, the Saints parted with a first-round draft pick in the 1985 draft in exchange for the fading running back. Campbell finished out the season in New Orleans and played 1 more year for the Saints, but he was relegated to second string by the end of that season, and he knew the writing was on the wall. Even though he considered coming back 1 more year in order to reach 10,000 career rushing yards, he ultimately decided to call it quits after the 1985 season. NFL running backs aren't known for their longevity, and Campbell was no different. For his career, he ended up with 9,407 yards and 74 touchdowns. He also caught 121 passes for 806 yards, but surprisingly, he never had a receiving touchdown. He was elected to the NFL Hall of Fame in 1991, his first year of eligibility, entering the Hall with John Hanna, Stan Jones, Tex Schramm, and Jan Stenerud. Campbell became the first Texas Longhorns player to have his jersey retired by the university, his number 20 being retired in 1979. And in 1981, he was declared an official state hero of Texas, becoming the first person who didn't fight at the Battle of the Alamo to receive the honor, with the other 3 being Stephen F. Austin, Sam Houston, and Davy Crockett. In his prime, Campbell may have been the best running back to ever carry the ball. He didn't have the longevity or the postseason success of some of the others, but for the first 3 years of his career, he dominated the competition and struck fear into the hearts of defenders. Just how good was he? Well, I'll let Bum Phillips have the last word. When asked by a reporter if Campbell was in a class by himself, Bum quipped, "I don't know, but if he ain't, it don't take long to call roll." Hey, thanks for watching today, and if you liked the video, please don't forget to like and subscribe. And if you were lucky enough to see number 34 or number 20, if you saw him at Texas, demolish opposing defenses, please drop us a comment and share your favorite.